Good morning, everyone. My name is John Calia. I'm the author of The Awakening of Artemis, a new book that's available on both as an ebook and in paperback form from Amazon. It's very highly rated, 4.7 stars last I looked on Amazon, about the same on Goodreads. I'm reading to you this morning from Fairport, New York, which is a little village on the Erie Canal in upstate New York, where I woke up to 9-degree temperatures this morning. I'm reading this morning as a result of a request I got from someone who read a review of the book. So I'm going to read a very short chapter, and hopefully you'll be as excited about it as I am, and even more hopefully, I hope you'll buy the book. So, what is Artemis about? It's about one woman's journey, which takes place in 2049 America. And her journey is really about finding herself, but it also takes the form of an escape from a world where artificial intelligence and government control are pervasive. And it's a world which a lot of people buy into because of the convenience and luxury of it, but she finds abhorrent. So I'm going to read a little bit about, starting from chapter 3, just to glance at my notes here quickly. Our hero, Diana, is a war hero. She's been reassigned to the Pentagon. So it's her first time living within the pods. When I refer to pods, what I'm referring to is 15 walled cities throughout the United States that house 90% of the population. And this is the world in which she finds herself. So let me begin without further ado. Diana's self-driving car was having a nervous breakdown. While the traffic around her moved nose to tail like bullets being shoved into a chamber, Diana guided her chariot worm-like through the gaps, accelerating where circumstances allowed. The car's software objected, but Diana just hit the override switch on the side of the joystick, repeatedly. In the 5 months since she had been reassigned, she still chafed at the constant monitoring. Facial scanners reading her expression, algorithms that endeavored to meet her unarticulated needs, and vehicles that piloted themselves. She recalled the horror she felt when the podosphere was announced as a great public works project to pull the nation out of the Great Depression, GD2, as it was called. Each pod was a self-contained ecosystem walled off like gated communities against the potential intrusion of the small percentage of the population that chose not to join the majority. That's not allowed, whined the automatic voice. I need to find a better voice option, she thought. Perhaps a French accent would be funny instead of annoying. Speed limit exceeded by 12.3 miles per hour, said the voice. Oh, shut up. She flipped the bypass switch, the one her boyfriend Jeff had installed, allowing her to jump off the under-highway charging grid. Mobile scanners ahead, 0.7 miles. At last, some useful information, she uttered under her breath. Slowing to what felt like a snail's pace, she successfully navigated the scanners as she passed through the exit gates from the DC pod. She rushed into her apartment, dying for a shower after her workout, and was confronted by her augmented reality assistant, her ARA, Courtney. Yikes, she yelped, taking half a step backwards. Pardon me, Diana, said Courtney, the edges around her image glowing. You scared the crap out of me, Diana found herself mentally plotting to kill the avatar, part of the technology package included in her monthly rent. The facial scanner read her startled expression, which prompted Courtney to ask, would you like me to change the entry settings for you? What? Said Diana, her heart still pounding from the rush of adrenaline. Change them to what? Well, there are 3 entry settings, came the reply. If you would prefer that I not greet you as you enter, you can have the scanner read your expression and the algorithm will determine how best to meet your needs. And the third option? No greeting at all, replied Courtney matter-of-factly. Only 7.3% of the population choose this option. Blessed relief. I'll join the minority, thanks. Very well, said Courtney, who disappeared, turning into electronic dust. Of course, the scanner will still be reading my expression and calculating and recalculating my wants and needs, even if I don't want what the algo says I need. This new life within the pods promised to be challenging. After years as a drone pilot living in the desert, she had been plunged into the podosphere, each of 15 pods a walled city-state which collectively housed more than 80% of the population. It was a world people had opted into. There was a seductive vibe to it, a natural evolution from social media like Facebook and Twitter. People had become accustomed to being fed information and advertising based on their likes. Now they could live in a world where one's likes were determined by artificial intelligence, and they would be confronted with a steady stream of opportunities to have their needs satisfied. No clicks involved. The scanners read their expressions. Their embedded chips analyzed the hormonal secretions in their bloodstream, and the AI delivered. It was not a life she would have chosen, but having been reassigned to the Pentagon, she was part of the podosphere whether she liked it or not. "You have two messages," said Courtney's overhead voice. "First message, your culture index dropped slightly from last week. You were overheard making a politically next," yelled Diana, exasperated. "It's incessant," she thought, as the next message took the form of an augmented reality image of Jeff, appearing as though a genie had popped out of a lamp. Instinctively, she knew what was coming. They had been together barely 2 months, and Jeff had already started to complain, no, whine, about Diana's dedication to her routine. When she wasn't working or sleeping, she was working out. At least that was Jeff's assessment. "Diana, I'm sorry," but Diana shut it down before he could finish. She had heard it before and didn't need to hear it again. Jeff was just the latest. He was too weak to handle a woman like Diana, too needy to be with someone who didn't put his needs above hers. Nevertheless, she felt a lump rising in her throat like a frog was about to emerge from her mouth. She stifled it. She would not shed a tear, not one, on a man, not any man, and certainly not Jeff's. Diana's commute to the office was interrupted by a protest outside the Capitol building. Inching her way through the crowd, one protester waved a sign in front of her windshield, "Raise the basic income." She made a mental note to take a different route to work. By the 2030s, jobs lost to artificial intelligence had exceeded 40% of the workforce. First, it was long-haul truck drivers, journalists, and accountants. Then it was low-level engineers, medical assistants, and call center operators. The first attempt to implement a universal basic income came late 2025, but the opposition to a massive transfer of wealth to the unemployed was too fierce to overcome. By the 2030s, the economic damage was too robust to ignore. Now in 2049, with nearly 60% of the population depending upon UBI to make ends meet, Ubies, as they were not so affectionately called, were marching in the street demanding more. The unattended Starbucks kiosk in the lobby had received Diane's data predicting her arrival time. As she walked past it to the elevators, a robotic arm reached out to hand her a grand frappuccino and a scone, charging her account as it did so. She grabbed them without losing her stride. In the elevator, 2 young women were gushing about some shoes. "I saw the shoes on my social feed, and my ARA knew I loved, like over the moon loved them. And my car took me straight to the store. They were sitting on the counter in my size when I arrived." "Yeah," said her friend. "I love the latest update. It makes life so much easier. Last week, it sensed that I needed some comfort food and had the recipe for meatloaf projected above my kitchen island when I got home. Then it queued up my favorite movie and started it as soon as I walked into the living room after dinner." Geez, thought Diana, it's amazing how people are willing to give up their privacy in exchange for a slightly easier life. Flustered and a bit late, she arrived at her cubicle and as she sat down was automatically logged in. Her virtual screen materialized from thin air. Before she could take a sip of her coffee, a pop-up disrupted her routine. New orders. A hard message to ignore, she thought, and one that would certainly focus her mind on something besides her ex-boyfriend. Yesterday, the president had made an announcement. Satellite guidance systems and those football-sized lasers that Diana had deployed would now be controlled by an algorithm. This clearly did not bode well for Space Force pilots' careers. Pilots of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, would be replaced by artificial intelligence. Despite Diana's heroics, the source of the hack that had turned U.S. missiles on their military masters had not been discovered. Last night's news described how the new algorithm would detect intrusions and eliminate the need to have humans manning the stations, the risk that Diana or someone like her might not be around to thwart their next attempt. Diana wasn't sure what to make of it. When she was assigned to the Pentagon, she thought of it as temporary. It was common for career officers to do a tour in Washington between field assignments. She had always assumed she would be transferred to a combat unit at the end of this tour. Still, she was only a few months into her Pentagon assignment, and she didn't expect to be reassigned so soon. With pilots' careers now in limbo, what could she possibly be reassigned to? The virtual image of Emmeline's assistant, Margaret, appeared over her workstation, hovering as a floating head. Diana had never met Margaret in person and wasn't even sure if she was a real person or an ARA. But Evelyn was Diana's immediate boss, so she was used to seeing Margaret, or at least Margaret's head, whenever Evelyn summoned her. Colonel Sakura would like to see you, Major, said the head. Okay, I'll be there as soon as I read my orders. New orders were the one thing that would stop anyone in his or her tracks. New orders were disruptive. They often meant you could be packing your entire household and moving to another city or another country. The timing was nearly immediate, and scant attention was paid to the personal impact, kids switching schools or relationships interrupted. Everyone would drop what they're doing when the new orders came in. Your orders are why the colonel wants to see you, the head turned to electronic dust before Diana's eyes, and then vanished into thin air. Diana took the hint and headed to Evelyn's office, but not before taking a quick glance at the orders. Special Operations was the headline, but the details were omitted. Top Secret was printed in bold type. The document simply confirmed what Margaret had said. Report to Colonel Evelyn O'Malley Sakura. I guess I'd better go see Colonel Sakura, she mumbled to herself. As she navigated the now familiar hallways toward the cavern of Evelyn's inner sanctum, all she could think of were the mistakes, real and imagined, she had made during her brief tenure. She had always been impolitic, a bit too loud at officers-only parties, fraternizing with enlisted people, or letting her temper get the better of her at the wrong moment. Being a wise ass was her natural defense mechanism, especially on the days like today, when she had emotions bubbling inside. In the last 24 hours, her career had been sidelined and her boyfriend had broken up with her. On her journey from home to office, she had been confronted by several reminders of why she hated life in the potosphere. Cars that drove themselves, Ubis demonstrating in the streets, and girls squealing their delight over software that made shoe shopping frictionless. As she walked, she exchanged insults with the men that passed by her. Hey, Diana, a thought just crossed my mind, Eddie said when he spotted her coming down the hallway. Must have been a lonely journey, she interrupted. A few chuckles arose from the adjoining cubicles. Insults were the only language men understood, and Diana spoke it fluently. What are you going to do now that you can't play video games in the desert? Eddie continued, trying but failing to hide a smirk. I think I'm about to find out. So that's chapter 3, and I hope you enjoyed that. It's just a picture of what our hero is going through at the beginning of the book. And I hope you find it interesting enough to buy the book and find out where it all ends. Be well.